Welcome back to Modern Stoic Mind. Tonight, we step away from the noise of the world and spend some time exploring the storms that often exist within us. Over the past week, we've followed stories about overthinking, anxiety, approval, emotional burdens, and the search for inner peace. Stories that remind us that some of life's greatest battles are not fought against the world around us, but within our own minds. In these stories, you'll meet people who struggle with sleepless nights, fears about the future, the opinions of others, and the weight of carrying emotions that were never theirs to bear. And through each journey, you'll discover timeless wisdom from the Stoics. Wisdom that has helped people find peace for more than 2,000 years. So wherever you are tonight, whether you're relaxing after a long day, reflecting on life, or simply looking for a moment of calm, take a deep breath. Allow yourself to slow down. Allow yourself to listen. And allow these stories to remind you of something we all need to hear from time to time. You do not have to solve tomorrow tonight. You do not have to carry every burden. And you do not have to believe every thought that enters your mind. So dim the lights. Settle in. And join us for this collection of Stoic stories for an overthinking mind. Welcome to Modern Stoic Mind. The Archer and the Wind. A young archer dreamed of becoming the greatest marksman in the kingdom. Every day he trained. Every day he practiced. And every day he became more frustrated. Some days the wind was too strong. Some days the rain ruined his aim. Some days his hands trembled. Some days his arrows missed by inches. Whenever he failed, he became angry. Whenever he succeeded, he worried about failing again. Years passed. Yet peace always seemed beyond his reach. One morning, he climbed a mountain to seek advice from an old Stoic master. The old man listened quietly as the archer explained his frustrations. I train harder than anyone. I do everything right. So why can't I control the outcome? The old Stoic smiled, then handed him a bow. Fire an arrow. The young man drew the string and released. The arrow flew perfectly and struck the center of the target. The old man nodded. Now tell me. Which part was yours? The archer looked confused. All of it. The old man shook his head. The effort was yours. The discipline was yours. The focus was yours. But the wind? Not yours. The weather? Not yours. The future? Not yours. The young archer stood silently. The Stoic master continued. Most suffering comes from trying to control what was never ours to control. We cannot control whether people praise us. We cannot control whether life is fair. We cannot control what happens tomorrow. But we can control our actions, our character, our effort, our response. The old man pointed toward the target. The Stoics teach that your job is to release the arrow. What happens after that belongs to life. For the first time, the young archer understood. He had spent years obsessing over results he could never fully control. And because of that, he never enjoyed the process, never appreciated the practice, never found peace in the effort itself. As Epictetus taught, make the best use of what is in your power, not what is outside your power. Not what might happen tomorrow. Not what others think. Only what is in your hands today. The archer picked up another arrow. This time he felt different. Calmer. Lighter. He drew the bow. Focused. Released. And whether it struck the center or not, he smiled. Because he finally understood the lesson. Success is not hitting every target. Success is giving your best effort, then letting go. Aim carefully. Release confidently. Accept peacefully. Modern Stoic mind. The woman who waited for life to begin. Every morning she told herself the same thing. Once things finally settle down, then I'll be happy. Once she earned more money. Once she fixed her problems. Once she became better. Once life became easier. So she waited. And waited. And slowly, without realizing it, her entire life became preparation for a future that never arrived. Even beautiful moments passed unnoticed. Sunsets, laughter, quiet mornings, moments of peace. Her mind was always somewhere else, always chasing the next version of life. One evening, while walking through the countryside alone, she came across an old gardener tending to a small field of flowers beside a worn stone path. The old gardener moved slowly, carefully, peacefully. The woman watched him quietly for a moment before asking, "How can you work so calmly when life is so uncertain?" The old gardener smiled softly, then held up a single flower. This flower blooms for only a short time. Yet it does not spend its life waiting to become something else. The woman stood silently. The gardener continued. Most people postpone their lives. They wait for certainty. They wait for perfection. They wait for permission to be at peace. But life is happening now. A cool breeze moved gently through the field around them. The flowers swayed peacefully in the fading light. The gardener knelt beside the soil. Stoicism teaches us to accept the present moment fully. Not because life is perfect, but because this moment is the only one we are ever truly given. The woman looked across the quiet field. For the first time in years, she noticed how beautiful the evening really was. The sound of the wind, the warmth of fading sunlight, the stillness around her. Nothing in her life had changed. Yet somehow, everything felt different. Because she realized, peace had never been waiting somewhere in the future. Peace was hidden inside the present moment all along. As Zeno of Citium taught, happiness is a good flow of life. Not a destination. Not a finish line. A way of moving through the world. The sun slowly disappeared beneath the horizon. The flowers continued swaying gently in the evening wind. And for the first time in a very long while, the woman stopped waiting for life to begin. Because she finally understood. Life had already begun. Modern Stoic mind. The prisoner of tomorrow. Every morning, his mind rushed toward the future before the day had even begun. What if something goes wrong? What if he fails? What if everything falls apart? His body lived in the present, but his mind lived somewhere days, months, even years ahead. He struggled to enjoy anything. Even peaceful moments felt temporary, because somewhere inside him, fear was always waiting. The future haunted him like a shadow he could never outrun. One evening, overwhelmed by endless worry, the man climbed a lonely hill overlooking the city. The sky above him was dark with approaching storms. At the top sat an old Stoic watching the clouds roll across the horizon. Calm, unmoving. The anxious man sat beside him quietly, then finally asked, "How do I stop fearing tomorrow?" The old Stoic pointed toward the storm. "Tell me, can you stop those clouds from coming?" "No." "Can you control when the rain arrives?" "No." "Can you command the wind to change direction?" "No." The old Stoic nodded gently. "Then why do you spend your life trying to control a future that has not yet arrived?" The man stared silently toward the storm. The philosopher continued, "Most people suffer more in imagination than they ever do in reality." The wind moved softly through the grass around them. "You have turned tomorrow into a prison. You walk inside fears that do not yet exist. You rehearse pain before life has even asked it of you." The words struck deeply, because he knew they were true. For years, he had sacrificed peace today, for fear of what might happen tomorrow. The storm clouds above them slowly shifted, still dangerous, still uncertain, yet strangely beautiful. The old Stoic smiled softly. Stoicism does not teach us that nothing bad will happen. It teaches us that we can meet whatever happens with strength. As Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The man closed his eyes and listened to the wind. For the first time in a long while, he noticed the present moment. The cool air, the sound of distant rain, the silence between thoughts. Tomorrow had not arrived, yet he had already spent years suffering through it. And suddenly he understood. Peace is impossible when your mind is constantly living somewhere your body has not yet reached. The storm eventually came. Rain fell across the hills. The wind howled through the darkness. But this time, the man no longer feared it. Because he finally understood. You do not survive tomorrow by fearing it today. Modern Stoic mind. Most people never become prisoners of walls. They become prisoners of other people's opinions. Every decision he made passed through an invisible question. What will they think? He dressed for approval, spoke for approval, lived for approval. And little by little, he lost himself. The strangest part was that nobody had asked him to do it. The prison existed entirely inside his own mind. One evening, exhausted from constantly seeking validation, the man left the city and walked deep into the hills. The path eventually led him to a cliff overlooking the sea. There sat an old philosopher watching waves crash against the rocks below. The man sat beside him. After several minutes he finally spoke. "How do I stop caring what people think?" The philosopher pointed toward the ocean. "Do you see those waves?" "Yes." "Do they stop moving because someone dislikes them?" No. Do they ask permission before reaching the shore? No. The philosopher smiled. Then why do you ask permission to be yourself? The word struck him deeply. 4 years. He had allowed strangers to decide how he felt about himself. A compliment lifted him. A criticism destroyed him. His peace belonged to everyone except him. The waves continued crashing below. Unaffected. Steady. Free. The philosopher spoke again. Most people hand their happiness to the crowd, and then wonder why they never feel secure. The wind moved across the cliffside. The sea stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Stoicism teaches us that character matters more than reputation. Reputation lives in other people's minds. Character lives in your actions. As Epictetus taught, if you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. The man watched the waves. For the first time, he stopped imagining the opinions of others and started listening to himself. Nothing outside him had changed, but something inside him had become lighter. The sea did not ask for approval. The wind did not ask for approval. The stars did not ask for approval. And neither should you. The moment you stop chasing approval, you begin walking toward freedom. Modern Stoic mind. The woman who carried everyone's pain. Everywhere she went, she carried the weight of other people's emotions. Their problems became her problems. Their sadness became her sadness. Their anger followed her home like shadows. She listened endlessly, helped constantly, gave everything she could. And slowly, without realizing it, she disappeared beneath the weight of everyone else's suffering. At night she felt exhausted, not physically, emotionally. Yet every time she tried to step back, guilt consumed her. If I stop helping, am I selfish? One evening, overwhelmed and emotionally drained, she walked far beyond the city walls to clear her mind. There, beside a quiet river, sat an old philosopher watching the water flow. The woman sat nearby silently. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then finally she whispered, "How do I carry all of this pain without drowning in it?" The old philosopher looked toward the river, then pointed gently at the water. "Do you see how the river continues flowing?" "Yes." "It touches every stone along its path, yet carries none of them." The woman stared quietly at the moving water. The philosopher continued, "Compassion does not mean absorbing the suffering of everyone around you." Many people confuse kindness with self-destruction. You can care deeply for others, without setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. The woman lowered her head. Those words struck something deep inside her. For years, she believed love meant carrying everyone, saving everyone, fixing everyone. But all it had done was leave her emotionally exhausted. The river moved calmly beside them, unaffected, steady, peaceful. The old philosopher smiled softly. Stoicism teaches us to love others with wisdom, not emotional slavery. You are responsible for your actions. your character, your compassion. But you are not responsible for carrying the emotional weight of the entire world. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do. For the first time in years, the woman felt herself breathe fully. Not because life had become easier, but because she realized peace requires boundaries. The river continued flowing into the darkness, touching everything, carrying nothing. Care deeply, but do not drown in the storms of others. Modern Stoic mind. The man who feared silence. Every moment of his life was filled with noise. Music, voices, screens, notifications, endless distraction. Whenever silence appeared, he rushed to escape it. He filled every empty space immediately, because deep down, silence frightened him. Not because silence was loud, but because in silence, he could finally hear himself. The doubts he ignored, the fears he buried, the loneliness he outran. So he kept running, through noise, through distraction, through endless stimulation. Yet no matter how much noise surrounded him, peace never came. One evening, exhausted from the constant chaos of his own mind, the man wandered beyond the city into the distant countryside. There, far from the noise of the world, he discovered an old Stoic sitting alone beneath a tree as the sun disappeared behind the hills. No music, no conversation, only wind moving softly through the grass. The silence felt unbearable. Finally, the man asked, "How can you sit here with nothing?" The old Stoic smiled gently, then replied, "I am not sitting here with nothing. I am finally sitting here with myself." The words unsettled him. The philosopher looked toward the darkening sky. Most people fear silence because silence reveals what distraction hides. The man looked away, because he knew it was true. For years, he had used noise to avoid himself, to avoid uncomfortable thoughts, to avoid grief, to avoid emptiness. But the more he escaped silence, the more disconnected he became from his own life. The wind moved gently through the trees above them, steady, calm, unhurried. The Stoic closed his eyes for a moment. Silence is not punishment. It is where clarity begins. The man sat quietly beside him. At first, his thoughts raced wildly. Regret surfaced. Fear surfaced. Restlessness surfaced. But slowly, something changed. For the first time in years, he stopped running from himself. And beneath all the noise, he discovered something unexpected. Stillness. As Musonius Rufus taught, it is not hardship that disturbs us, but our opinions about it. Perhaps silence had never been the enemy. Perhaps the real fear was finally facing his own mind. The stars slowly appeared above them. The world remained quiet. But now, the silence no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. The people who fear silence most are often the ones who need it most. Modern Stoic mind. Every night, his body was exhausted, but his mind refused to sleep. The room was quiet. The city outside had fallen silent. The world was resting. Yet inside his mind, a storm continued raging. Thought after thought, fear after fear, question after question. What if tomorrow goes wrong? What if I fail? What if everything falls apart? The clock moved slowly through the darkness. 2:13 a.m. 3:07 a.m. 4:21 a.m. Still awake, still trapped inside his own thoughts. Every night felt the same. His body remained in bed, but his mind wandered endlessly into futures that did not exist. And the more he fought for sleep, the further it seemed to move away. One night, unable to bear it any longer, he left his house and walked through the sleeping city. Rain fell softly around him. The streets were empty. The world felt strangely peaceful. Eventually, he reached a hill overlooking the city below. There sat an old philosopher beneath a lantern, watching the distant lights. The man sat beside him. For several minutes neither spoke, only the sound of rain. Finally he asked, "How do I quiet my mind?" The philosopher pointed toward the city. "Tell me, how many of those lights are keeping you awake tonight?" The man looked confused. "None." The philosopher nodded. "And yet you have allowed thoughts that do not exist to steal your peace." The rain continued falling softly. Most people think they are suffering from reality. But often, they are suffering from imagination. The words settled heavily in the night air. The philosopher continued, "You are trying to solve problems that have not arrived. You are fighting battles that have not begun. You are carrying burdens that do not yet exist." The man lowered his head, because he knew it was true. Every night he traveled into tomorrow. Every night he returned carrying fears from a future that had never happened. The old philosopher smiled gently. "Peace comes when you stop demanding certainty from life. Sleep comes when you stop arguing with tomorrow." As Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The rain slowly eased. The clouds began to drift apart. For the first time in months, the man stopped fighting his thoughts. He simply watched them pass, like clouds crossing the night sky. And something remarkable happened. The storm inside him grew quieter. Not because life had become certain, but because he had stopped demanding certainty from it. Far beyond the horizon, the first light of morning appeared. The city slowly woke. Birds began to sing. The night was ending. And for the first time in a very long while, his mind felt still. Some storms are not outside. They are inside us. And peace begins the moment we stop feeding them. What's the thought that keeps you awake most often? Let us know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this week's stories, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and join us for more wisdom on Modern Stoic Mind. Until next time, guard your peace. Modern Stoic Mind.